Waiters and waitresses share the most awkward first dates they've witnessed firsthand.
Had these two people that were there on a first date. After the appetizers, this poor man got the poops and was going back and forth to the bathroom all night. There was only a few other people in the restaurant at the time, so it was noticeable, and they were chuckling every time he got up. I honestly felt so bad for the guy.
I was the one on the first date. Went to a bar with this guy. Our waitress came up and immediately recognized him, was super friendly, took our orders and left. While she was gone, he told me they used to date. The rest of the night they openly flirted with each other. There was no second date.
I worked at a bar where like 50% of our business was from Tinder dates. This one time, two guys came in separately and sat at different tables by themselves, along the same wall. They were both facing the door and clearly waiting for dates. Eventually a woman comes in, walks up to the closest guy, sits down, and they start chatting. They start ordering drinks. After 5 minutes, the other guy, who is still waiting by himself, gets up and walks over to the couple. He says hi to the girl and is like, aren't you so-and-so? I'm so-and-so, we were supposed to be meeting? She was clearly flustered, lots of awkward laughter, and she gets up and goes with the other guy to the other table. Couple minutes later the other woman shows up and sits with the first guy, and he tells her all about it.
At the end of the meal, after appetizers, 2 of the most expensive entrees, a high-priced bottle of wine, and dessert with a bottle of Dom. The man says to me, in front of his date, "Hey man. We are on a first date. What more can I do to guarantee I get laid tonight?" The young lady turned deep red with her jaw dropped open. I sat down the bill and said, "After asking me that? There is nothing you can do. The date I saw started off great. I was playing in a band at a small club. There were about 30 people in the club. A couple who had been sitting close together in the corner booth disappeared together into one of the bathrooms. In between songs, when it was quiet in the club, the bartender yells, 'They better not be in there yoinksing on my sink.' The whole place turns and stares at the bathroom door, and as we're staring, the couple emerges, smiling at first. Then they look around, see everybody staring at them, and their faces turn a deep color of shame. They quickly paid their bill and left.
The guy's card declines. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I waved him over near the credit card machine so it would look like he needed to go to the bathroom. He told me to try it again, and I assumed he was going to move money over on his app. He went back to his date. Card declines again. The machine prints a receipt that states the reason for decline: insufficient funds. I keep trying 4 more times. I go over to the table and say I'm having an issue with the card, might be our machine, do you have another? I walk away with a new card, and it declines. I wave him over. He gets up angrily, and I'm guessing now the date has caught on. He proceeds to berate me, saying that it must be our machines because he knows he has money. He starts making fun of me, questioning if I know what I'm doing. He is doing this in front of his date, I'm guessing to save face. Gives me another card. Declined. The date pays.
I worked as a barista at a coffee shop with a dishwashing sink that brought you face to face with whoever was sitting at the coffee bar across from you. For some reason, so many people chose this spot for their first dates, so I would have to wash dishes and pretend I wasn't literally on the date with them. One time a person I knew was on their first date with someone and chose the cursed seat across for the dishwashing sink. Because we knew each other, we chatted a little bit, and then, as if a partition was raised between us, they began their date. But I still had dishes to do. So darn uncomfortable.
Worked at a pub connected to a brewery in college. Dude comes in with a stunning woman, I mean she's absolutely gorgeous. Whole time they're sitting at the end of the bar, and you can hear the guy talking about how he has a room for them next door at the hotel in downtown. So they decide to go to the brewery next door, gonna pull a little dine and dash. They got over there and didn't realize we were on the same system, so he orders a couple of beers, and the bartender on the brewery side asks if he wants to add it to his tab. He looks over confused and says, "What tab? I've never been here." She prints off the restaurant bill plus his brewery tab. It's like $80 or so. He just blankly stares at the poor bartender, flies off the handle. The girl he was with ended up paying for it. They walked across the street and to the hotel. He has already invited her up. She stalls until her Uber gets there and then just dipped out. Kinda funny, kinda awkward, but that's what you get for dine and dash. As a bartender, my personal favorite was one where the guy showed up to meet a girl, but left with another dude. The two people on the date showed up separately, had a cutely awkward first few minutes, and things went business as usual for about the first 30 minutes or so. Then a guy, let's call him Frank, shows up and happens to sit at the bar still next to the dude on the date. Frank is a bro. Like a bro. Like put a Kyle in a coma for 15 years and see what he's like when he wakes up bro. I'm not totally sure how this happened, but Frank and date guy start chatting and within minutes are full-blown broing out. The rest of the date was largely the girl looking at her phone while date guy and Frank had the time of their lives. On one hand I felt bad for her, but on the other I was watching a best friendship form in real time and it was kind of hard to be mad at that. After finishing her meal the girl said goodbye and got an Uber home, but date guy could not have been less phased. He and Frank hung out drinking together until closing time and helped hold each other up on the walk/stumble out the door. Horribly awkward, pretty rude to the girl, but goddamn was it pure.
There was a lady in my section who was by herself. She was just waiting. This lady was absolutely gorgeous and dressed to kill. I ended up talking to her a bit since she was obviously bored. She was smart and seemed like she had a good sense of humor. It turned out she was there to meet some guy on a blind date. I was like, holy crap, what kind of jerk would leave a woman like this waiting? A complete douche as it turned out. The guy eventually rolled in looking like a crunchy bro. This was a fine dining restaurant, and acting as if he was just too cute. Apparently the woman confronted him about his being late because he actually got on top of the table and asked everyone in the restaurant if they thought she should forgive him or not. Everyone ignored the guy. I think one guy said, "Get off that table, dude." They talked for a bit and then the guy went to the bathroom. I went up to the table and said, "You don't need to pay for your drinks or anything. If you want to leave, you can just leave." She said thanks, but she ended up going ahead with the date. They left my section and went somewhere else. Honestly, the thought that that guy actually got away with a cringe-inducing stunt disappointed me. I wanted her to ditch the guy so bad.
I waited on a couple who were clearly on a first date, and the lady was clearly not impressed by the guy she was on the date with. The date was over quick enough and the guy paid, leaving me a 5% tip. The next day, the lady came into the restaurant, walked up to me, said that was the worst first date I've ever been on, and I was mortified when he stiffed you on the tip and then handed me $20.
Was a server for about a decade. One of my old coworkers would bring all his first dates to the fancy restaurant we worked at because he would always get his meals discounted as per the employee handbook. This started getting tricky when he started dating one of the other servers. Watching her serve a handful of his first dates over the first few weeks of their relationship was always an interesting time. I worked for a while as a waitress at a small town restaurant. I hesitate to call it a date, but I witnessed a great encounter. A grown man, probably late 30s, comes into the restaurant and tells us what table he wants and that he is there for a date. Describes what his date will be wearing and goes to sit down. Date gets there and isn't as described. It's another grown man, though he is wearing the bracelet that the first man described. I go to direct him to the table. We get almost there when first guy sees us and stands up. He has a weird look I wouldn't really call surprise, but not sure what else it could have been. They make eye contact and almost in unison they each say a variant of "You're actually a guy." Well, they had dinner anyway and chatted me up the whole time. Turns out both of them were pretending to be lesbians in Yahoo Messenger, hoping to get some hot young girls to go out with them. Not sure how they thought it would work once they met in person though. Not a date per se, but I worked at a high-end fine dining restaurant for a few years. A couple of times a week this lady would come in with a different gentleman. It was obvious she was an escort. They were generally nice enough guys, probably just wanting some companionship. She always pretended like she had never been to our restaurant. We had martini samplers she squealed about every time. We all just played along. Girls gotta work, right? And they guys she brought in always tipped pretty well. Once, as a high school teenager, while waiting tables at a now defunct Make Mexican restaurant chain, think Applebee's, but tacos, a first date came in. They seemed unable to converse. It was super awkward. Painful to watch. Well, at one point the woman asked for a refill of her tea. I dutifully went and got the pitcher and came back to fill her glass. While pouring, I literally dropped the entire pitcher, a full gallon, of sweet, sticky tea directly onto her. It went down her shirt. Her skirt. It was everywhere. She was completely and utterly soaked. My newly blossoming career as a server flashed before my incredibly stoned eyes. I apologized profusely. I brought her out like 4,000 napkins. Her date was dumbfounded and probably didn't think this could get worse, but here we are. Well, she cleaned up the best she could. And they ate their meals. And, magically, they began talking. They started looking at each other like a new couple looks at each other. They laughed. They enjoyed their crappy food. She dried out. They left the restaurant an hour later, with her arm in his. They gave me the biggest tip I had ever gotten. I got $20 on a $20 bill, in 1996. Somehow, my idiotic, blunder, turned the worst first date ever into the best first date ever. I like to imagine them now as happily married, parents of 7 lovely children, who love telling the story of the moron who poured an entire gallon of tea on her, 25 years ago.
Please subscribe to Reddit Ramblings for more of the best Reddit stories.